Hey everybody, it's Aaron from Gottman and Jarrett from Supernatural by Design. How you doing, Jarrett?
Good. How you doing, brother Aaron?
Doing good. Thanks for coming on.
Yay.
Got your end of the world vitamin water?
Yes, I got it right here. Okay. It keeps the mind on point, and that's all I got. That's all I got.
That's all you got. That's all you got.
That's all I got. Sorry.
That's all you got. So the question of the day is, when are we out of here? Everybody's always like, yeah, when is Jesus coming? When is all this chaos going to unfold? And
Yep.
maybe I'll preface our conversation first a few minutes here. And my thoughts lately has been this rapture is likely an escape from sudden destruction. And I believe, Jared thinks a very similar pattern. And he's been on the theme of war and making connections with celestial signs. And, nobody really knows the day or the hour. But hey, we're trying to figure out the patterns and through biblical context and through stars and the sun and where it sits. And we're going to get into some of that stuff later on. And Jarrett's got a real mathematical mind. He's got all these charts and graphs ready to go. But before we get into this whole calculus mind set, actually, you know what, Jarrett? I should tell you, the worst mark I ever got in high school was in my calculus, algebra, geometry high school class. And what you're going to present is very similar to that. So there might be a few moments where I go, can you say that again? And so,
mine is English, so
so there you go. So maybe we'll help each other out. But if you guys that are watching, if you have a question while we're explaining things later on, just write question and then write your question. And you can ask Jarrett directly. I'll try and keep an eye on the chat and if any questions come up. Yeah. But and then before we get into what Jarrett's going to show, I'll remind you my general timeline is, I think, maybe Hanukkah 2030 might be the time that we rededicate the Millennial Temple, and Day of Atonement 2030. Jesus comes back, second coming, minus 7 years gets you to October 15th, 2023. I think that might be the beginning of the tribulation period, and I have to say might because we don't know. We're speculating. Minus 180 days, and that gets us to this eclipse that Jarrett and I are going to be talking about, because I think it's fascinating the things that he found with that eclipse. And so, that being said, Jarrett, before we get into all your slides, what do you think about the time we're in and how close do you think we are?
Wow. Oh, wow. So the doomsday clock, the recent speech today by Biden and the tanks. I think it's more looking like a war rapture than anything.
Yes, a war rapture. Yeah. I like that
sudden
phrase.
Destruction.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the labor pains. I think we're in the labor pains. I think the increased frequency and the tension, NATO, and I mean, Russia's been clicking up with Iran, China. I think we're just waiting for Turkey to flip at this point. And they're all aligning against the West, even though they themselves don't necessarily have any commonalities. And so, but that's what you see in Ezekiel 38. And I think that right now is at any point in time in history makes sense for Ezekiel 38 to be fulfilled very soon.
I agree with you. And today was a very similar day for me. When I heard this Biden speech, I walked upstairs. My dad's watching CNN, and he's watching, and Biden saying, and this country sitting in this tank, and this country sitting in that tank, and this country sitting in this missile, and this country, and this country, and this country. And I'm like, you know what, man? This is pretty much it.
Yep.
All these countries are picking their side, and here we go. Now, I don't think they've officially declared World War III, but I mean, my goodness, when all the countries start throwing ammunition in a pile, what else can we actually call this, right?
Absolutely.
And so this was a similar day to for me when Trump closed the airlines back in March 2020. That was my moment of, oh my goodness, whoa, we got to wake up, we got to look at. So today was like another like, whoa, I think today was a big day. And, absolutely. And you would agree, yeah?
Absolutely.
I don't see anybody going back home. I don't think anybody's going to just back down and go, you know what? Let's just all hug now. The only way to do that is some antichrist figure to come in and say peace and safety, and everybody
True,
calm
true.
down.
Yep.
But at the same time, I believe that in order for this antichrist system to take place, this whole system has to crumble.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and what better way to do that with a World War III? And
Yeah.
so, um, yeah. Any other thoughts on that before we move on to some of your slides and some of your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, other than yes, that this exchange I think will be quick. I don't think that's going to be anything that's necessarily devastating the whole world because we have to have infrastructure still set up like cryptocurrency in order to do the buying and selling and stuff like that. So I don't think it's going to be just like complete annihilation, but I do think it's definitely a shift of global powers in order for these 10 kings to make sense. And so so yeah, I don't think it's gonna be quick. I mean, I don't think it's gonna be long. Like World War II was like what 6, 7 years. So or even World War I was like 4 years. So I mean, like I said, I think it's gonna be really quick.
Well, it's a different animal now. I don't think people are going to
Mhm.
be running around with toy guns and
Yeah.
throwing pieces of wood at each other. It's
Yep.
it's missiles and heavy artillery that is really going to make the difference at this point, and
Mhm.
EMPs and all
Yep.
sorts of things,
Nukes. Yep.
and nukes, of course. And I I watched this. There's tons of videos out there, but I watched this 1.5 hour video explaining how all these missiles can fly over the overseas over the ocean in less than 30 minutes. Most of these missiles can fly overseas in less than 30 minutes,
Yeah,
and
it's crazy.
there's thousands of them that are just aimed at each other, and they've been operating this for many years, designing this, and so when you read Babylon Falls in 1 hour, I understand now how that could actually happen. Like
Yeah.
in less than 1 hour, this world can just turn
Yep.
over
Flip.
like
Absolutely.
in a moment, in a moment.
Absolutely.
And I believe that's the reason why we got to get out of here.
Absolutely.
And so what really piqued my interest when I was making my timeline for this year was that eclipse in April, right around
Yes.
April 20th, and because that's 180 days back from when I speculate
Okay.
tribulation might begin.
Okay.
And then that brings me to Esther
Yeah.
chapter 1, 180 days. And then after that, she had a 7-day feast. And so here you are over on your channel talking about war, talking about Esther,
Hmm.
and talking about your eclipse,
Yep.
and how you are relating it. You call it the Haman eclipse, correct?
That's right. The Haman 2.0 eclipse. That's how God had made this initial connection was through Haman, and that basically Hitler was an archetype of that. As Haman is an archetype of the Antichrist in a lot of different ways, through desire and worship, the fact that he has 10 sons, similar to Antichrist, and his plot against the Jews, and that seems very characteristic of what happens at the midpoint of Daniel's 70th week with the abomination of desolation. And so, but yeah, through the lens of Haman and Hitler, Hitler just fits that pattern. And so this eclipse that occurs on 420 is basically echoing the start of World War II.
Now I don't know if you've mentioned it or somebody else did, or maybe I mentioned it. I don't know. I forget what I say and where I see videos. But now Hitler was it Man of the Year or something in the Time magazine?
Yes,
What year is it? The year before he arrived?
that might have been 1933. I mean, he won, I want to say, in January of 1933, the Nazi Party. And then a month later, you have this eclipse in February. And then a month later after that is when he actually starts opening concentration camps, right around Purim, by the way. So, but he might have been 32.
It looks like 1938. Am I looking at this correctly, or is it 39? Or no?
It might have
Anyway,
been because when the war broke out in 1939. It broke out in 1939.
okay, all right. So yeah, Man of the Year 1938. It looks like so. The year
Yep.
before World War II broke out, he was Man of the Year. And so what now, I'm not saying Zelensky's the Antichrist, but Zelensky was Man of the Year of this year.
He's doing some strange stuff.
Okay, so anyway, he's certainly a character. He's certainly a character in this whole this
Oh,
whole thing.
absolutely.
And so it's very interesting that he used Man of the Year 22 in the Time magazine, and Hitler was Man of the Year the year before World War
Mhm.
II began. I mean, patterns happen time and time again. So I think that's
Yep.
very interesting.
Yep.
All right. So why don't we talk about this eclipse now? Here, so put your math brains on now, guys, and don't get too overwhelmed. And but Jared's going to explain how he's come to this conclusion, how he's matched it with the Hitler eclipse, and he's called the Haman eclipse. And we'll pause and ask questions if we get a little confused. And yeah, pretend we are not good at calculus, Jared, as you speak about these things.
Yeah, and please, I do have the chat open here, so if there's any questions, please feel free to ask. I yeah, please feel free to ask.
and
So,
also to Jared, and for everybody listening, we're two brothers in Christ. We're never going to agree on absolutely everything, and we're just learning and growing. So if Jared might say something that I may or may not agree with or understand, and I just let him say his thing. And ultimately, we're just waiting for Jesus to show up, and we want you to get tight with Jared. I mean, get tight with Christ, not Jared. Jared would point everybody to Christ, and yeah, get tight with Christ, not Jared. See, all right. Anyway, all right, Jared, what do you got for us with your first?
Well, let me share. Yes, I understand. Here we go. Okay, so this is the. Let me know when you can see that.
Is that the one?
That is the one. Oh,
Okay.
this is weird with the background.
I'll do this.
Perfect. Okay, that works a whole lot better. Okay. Okay, so this is we'll say conjecture for now, that that the eclipse that occurs in April on 4/20/2023 is pointing to the rise of the Antichrist, as Hitler came to power, and we'll discuss this here in a little bit, but through a sorrow cycle of this eclipse in 2023 was the same one that occurred the very year that Hitler came to power. And so, again, I call this the Haman 2.0 eclipse, as many of the eclipses surrounding when Hitler came to power and an eclipse also dealt with Purim, just like the next lunar eclipses. In fact, the very next total lunar eclipse occurs on Purim, right? So we just had the last one on 11/8. The very next total lunar eclipse doesn't happen until 2025. Well, that one lands on Purim. So Purim is very significant for the end times. In fact, I would even argue Jesus specifically calls us out through the abomination of desolation, and at least the plot. So anyways, but that there's science behind this, and I think that's what I really hope the main takeaway is behind just God's celestial science, that there's order behind these things. They're not one-off celestial events. From the Jewish perspective, prophecy is done through patterns, and we see that in Genesis with the creation of everything on earth and the heavens. God doesn't need a day to rest, and yet He puts a day in the rest. Why? Right? So why is that? Well, it has to do with the millennial reign of Christ. And so, just in the very setup of creation, God overlaid a prophecy into everything. And so, Paul mentions that as well, that the feast days, the new moon, these are all just foreshadows of things to come, but the substance is Christ. So everything from a biblical perspective is based on patterns. And they're not one-off events. So, moreover, this eclipse wouldn't make sense if there wasn't something referenced behind it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
And so, and Jared's going to explain some things too. But what Jared's done here is essentially what he gets a lot of information, from the celestial signs and some data from NASA. But what they've done here is this 129 right beside these eclipses is sort of like a sticker. Think of the 129 as a sticker.
Yep.
And they're both the same number. They're both the same code in a way. And but go ahead, Jared. And
Okay. No, sorry. Yeah. No, I just kind of wanted to lay a quick little foundation.
mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's kind of the direction of why these patterns are significant. Down here, you can see the Saros is the key, and it really is to unlocking all of this stuff. And so, if you've never heard of a Saros cycle, it's relatively new to me myself, but it's essentially an 18-year pattern. When you'll have, let's say, an eclipse in the year 2000, 18 years later, that same eclipse comes around, and it's the exact same one as you just saw in 2000, 2018. They're related, and all eclipses are like this. Whether you're talking about solar eclipses or lunar eclipses, they all follow this specific pattern.
18-year pattern. Yeah.
The ancient cultures would set up their buildings to actually mark this exact 18-year pattern. And so this is just an example of one Saros number. So like what Brother Aaron had mentioned, like the 129 on that Haman 2.0 eclipse. Well, this is just taking the Saros pattern 136 and just kind of showing the eclipse paths from 1901 to 2045. And this is a great slide because it demonstrates two aspects about eclipses. One is that, so if we look at 1901, 18 years later, right? So 18 years later, 1919, but it shifts 120 degrees. One Saros cycle again later, 18 years, is 1937, yet it shifts 120 degrees from where it's seen. And then 18 years again later, comes right back because now we're making a full circle around the globe. 1955 is one Saros, and is also defined as a Saros period, which if you can see, that's 54 years. And so essentially every 54 years, 1901 plus 54 is 1955. And 1955 plus 54 years is 2009. So that is what is called a turn of the wheel. And this is a very significant pattern vertically as well as horizontally. And the reason why this is very significant, because the eclipses of 21 and 22 that we just had, the lunar eclipses, we just had a full turn of the wheel from the Jerusalem tetrad back in 67 and 68. So that's one reason why we know that the lunar eclipses that just occurred, starting in 5/26/2021 to this 11/8 is very significant and pointing to the temple. So there shouldn't be any surprise about why significant movement towards the third temple is happening right now.
Yeah.
But moreover, so does that make sense? Are there any questions on that?
Yeah, if there's any questions, just write question, and I'll try and keep track of the comment section. Somebody says, "Are we in World War III?" And you know what I would say is, "Are we not? How are we not?"
I would argue it's already started. Yes.
Yeah, I would say that it's yeah. I would think so. I agree. I think that it started. It's just a matter of not making it an official statement.
Yeah. I would say that the regular season has started, but we're not in the postseason just yet.
There you go. Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that. Why don't you show that 129 NASA clip, because that seemed to
Sure.
explain things for me a little bit more when you were
Sure.
trying to
Yeah,
explain
yeah.
this eclipse. And so this eclipse that's in 1933 is a similar pattern to 2023. Yeah,
Yep.
right. Okay,
Yep.
so show that on the stream. Go ahead.
Okay, so let me just back up here. So what you are looking at, Saints, is the solar eclipses from 2021 to 2030. Okay, it's just listing them out in chronological order. June 10th, 2021. Well, we are getting ready to come to, where are we at? Right here, 2023. April 20th. Okay. And so it's a hybrid eclipse. Now, this is a very unique eclipse, and these don't occur but only every 10 years, roughly. So it's even significant from just a solar eclipse perspective. But, anyways, so how we know that this is connected to Hitler in the first place is because of the Saros number. There's a 3-digit number that's connected to 18-year patterns, 3 of which is a 54-year pattern or turn of the wheel. So what's really interesting is when you come to NASA and you are just looking at this stuff, if you click these Saros cycle numbers, it gives you a whole bunch of information. It tells you, okay, when this eclipse pattern first started. It started back in 1100 AD on October 3rd. And it processes from the north to the south pole, ending around 25 AD. 2500 AD, I'm sorry. And then right here, you see it's basically 80 eclipses, and it gives you a breakout of how many of those are partials, how many of those are annular, how many of those are total, and how many of those are hybrid. Okay, so notice there's only 3 that are hybrid. Okay, this actually turns out to be the last hybrid of this Saros pattern. So that's very unique as well.
And then,
One way.
oh
Yeah,
yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. The next hybrid or the next eclipse of 129 is, what was it, in 40 or something like that, or
Yeah, 2041 or something,
2045, or
39 or something
quite
like that.
far from now? Yeah.
We'll see it here in just a second, but yeah, so you have the 1100s, 1200 AD, 1300 AD, 14, 15, 16. You kind of get the gist here. It goes every 18 years. That's the difference here. Just 18 years going down. And anyways, so you get to 1915, and then it gets to 1933, February 24th. And so this is the year that Hitler came to power. And this is in part why that first leg is called the Hitler eclipse. Okay. And so then 18 years again, and occurs in 1951, 18 years again, 1969, 1987, 2005. And then here we are again in 2023.
There you go.
So this is just one aspect of why it's connected to Hitler. Okay. Is because it's the same one that occurred when he came to power. However, when was Hitler born? April 20th of
Yeah.
1889.
Okay, so we got a double thing here. So we got
A double connection. That's right.
his birthday is April 20th, which matches with this eclipse.
Mhm. Yep.
And we have a Soros cycle 129 match as well. Now, an additional thing that I just thought of as you said that
Mhm.
was in Biden's speech. For some reason, he brings up Zelensky's birthday, and he said, "Oh, today's Zelensky's birthday." Now, I don't know why he had to bring that up. Why would he say that? But it's interesting that you just made that connection with Hitler's birthday, April
Yeah,
20th.
so no, so real quick, and we can just talk about that real quick. There definitely seems to be a pattern with people in positions of power as we're moving towards the end times. The ones that are significant to advancing the ball forward, these celestial signs are also occurring on their birthday. For a great example would be Macron. Okay, his birthday is it's a great one, is 12/21. So his birthday is the winter solstice, right? And so there was remember the Great Conjunction that was on his birthday. When we get a little bit further into this Purim connection, um, Raisi, the 12/4, there was an eclipse on 12/14/2020. That was his birthday. The longest lunar eclipse of our tetrad, partial eclipse of our tetrad for 2021, that was 1 day shy of Joe Biden's birthday. So, and there's others, but moreover, that the people that advance these end time events seem very much connected, and that God's using the celestial signs to mark their birthdays. Trump is another one. He was born on a total lunar eclipse, and so there's a connection here to these celestial signs and how God is moving these chess pieces around.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna add one little thing that's kind of fun.
Sure.
So I did the 68 pattern thing. I don't have fancy charts like Garrett does. Like, Garrett's way better. But anyway, April 21st, which is a day after this eclipse, ends up being a 68 pattern as well. And the other 68 pattern that is not really related, but it is related. March 22nd is a 68 pattern. When I say 68 pattern, we're adding the month, the day, and the 20 and the 23. And so March 22nd, there's the chart. But basically, that's a skull and bones number. But it's a beautiful day because it's 2023. So you got the 322 backwards, and you've got March 22nd. So it's a 322, 322 frontwards and backwards. It's the most perfect 322 pattern like ever, right? So, and is that not Nissan 1? I believe, isn't Nissan 1 March 22nd? I believe it is.
It should be, yeah, because
very close to that. If it's not, yeah. I'll go check real quick.
February 22nd is the start of Adar, which marks the month of Purim.
Yes, exactly.
And is also 1 year from the Pluto's return connection. When on February 22nd of 2022, it was that same palindrome connection. It was on a Tuesday. It's kind of a play on that. Well, 2 days later, there's another 2 to it. The Ukrainian invasion started. So, so from 1 year from Pluto's return, 222 is Adar, and then 1 month later, as you pointed out, is that another palindrome connection.
Basically, it's the first day of God's calendar. Within a day or 24 hours.
Yeah.
So for me, these are big watch days. Maybe Rapture, maybe not. At least we got something to look forward to every month. These 68 patterns. So the January 24 thing is done. But I mean, this January 20, I can scratch it out now. But it kind of lined up with this Biden speech today. And why would he wait to say it on Zelensky's birthday and make a point that it was Zelensky's birthday? I think it's pretty interesting.
That is very interesting. I need to pray on that one.
Why are we talking about his birthday? Otherwise, unless you actually wanted to say something about it. So,
I had mentioned something about him. Oh, I think he came to power in Ukraine during the week of Passover. Oddly enough, in 2019, he officially won the presidency of Ukraine
during Passover.
And so, yeah, there's definitely a unique connection to that guy. The fact that he's always wearing green, and we just seen this green comet. Like there's the fourth, horseman is a pale green horse. And whether wherever you're at, but it seems that those probably kick off really pretty quickly. And so, with the themes of horses and the fact that the last one's a green one, and so, green seems to be very part of this whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. We can smell those horses, can't we?
Yes,
man, we can see it, smell it. Yikes! And war will generate famine. War will generate massive death.
Kiwit. Okay, I see you.
Yikes!
Scottish word for Kiwit. Sorry, someone just said something about Kiwit. Go ahead. Sorry. Yes. What you got?
I don't know if we finished with your solar cycle and the 18-year pattern.
So
a cool thing you were saying is it's right in the center of the 18 years as well. Maybe you can bring that slide up too.
Yes. Okay. So the other thing, okay, let's recap. So we have 2 patterns here. We have one that is connected to the sorrow cycle, and secondly, when Hitler came to power, and secondly, is tied to his birthday. So there's two connections here that we've established. So now
and it's kind of a third connection with the 68. It's very close to the 68 pattern.
Yes, but this is where Hitler. Can you still? Is that big enough? You think?
I mean, if you can make it bigger, that's great. If you can't, oh well.
I can replay it. Slideshow. I can play from current slide. Okay, so you let me go right. Oh, where should I do it from? We'll do it from here. Okay, we'll do it from current slide. So we're right here. And his brother Aaron just stated that it is the exact middle of the tetrad moons that occurred on 2014 and 15, echoing the same pattern that we had in 49 and 50, with the fact that they landed on Jewish feast days. That's very significant, because the next time this sorrows pattern comes around is 2032 and 2033. That's 18 years difference there. And that's why I have the one. So if you're wondering what these 3-digit numbers, that's the sorrows numbers, and how I've tried to make them color match here. Mm-hmm. So 122, 122, 127, 132. These guys are also these guys. 18 years later, boom, they happen again. 4 blood moons in a row that also land on feast days. That's exactly what happened in 49 and 50 and 67 and 68, with those landing on Jewish feast days as well. So we're having the exact same setup as if we're back in 1949. Okay. Well, anyways, the exact middle of that pattern, is, where is that at? Oh, I don't want to show that. Where is it at? Right here. The exact middle of that pattern is our Hitler Haman 2.0 eclipse. 9 years and 5 days to the left was our 2014 eclipses, and 9 years and 5 days to the right is our 2032 eclipses. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's the exact middle of what we're calling this whole thing the millennial tetrad, because at this point here in 2032, whether Jesus comes in 2029, and there's some debates on that, I'm not going to die on the hill that it's 2032 necessarily, that this is when Jesus comes back, or 2029 that Jesus comes back, but I will die on the hill that 2032, the millennial kingdom has to be set up. Because it's marked by these feast days and 4 blood moons.
Okay. All right. So, okay. So what you're getting at with that comment is you are thinking that we are almost for sure out of here before 25 is at the very least is what you're getting at.
Yes, right. Because if it's happens now and Daniel's 70th week kicks off this year, then you're looking at 2030.
Mm.
And so there's a few years that Jesus, kind of, gets some things happen to get the millennial kingdom set up, and that but that by 2032 he establishes the millennial reign, like it's officially started. I know the Essenes, they predicted that Jesus was sacrificed in 32 AD. So if you do that 2,000 year count, it gets you here. But again, I when Jesus comes back, I guess it could be 2029, could be 2030, could be 2031, 2032, could even be 2033, I guess, if you want to argue that. But somewhere here, the millennial kingdom has to be officially kicked off. That's just
Based on the because of the eclipses and the tetrads is what you're getting at.
that's correct. That's correct, because I believe Brother Samuel pointed out very elegantly that the feast days, and I've began leaning this way as well, that they're exclusive to Israel in fulfilling their redemptive plan for them. And kind of some of the timeline that he marked with the Feast of Trumpets representing. It's interesting. There's 2 types of raptures in the Bible. There's a vertical rapture and there's a horizontal rapture, right? The Apostle Philip was horizontally raptured, right? Remember after the Ethiopian eunuch?
In Acts, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, he gets horizontally raptured. And then like Paul gets vertically raptured, right? So, but that the Feast of Trumpets is pointing to the horizontal rapture when he gathers from the 4 corners, the Jewish people. And so, but that's what this is pointing to. And of course, Isaiah 44:6 tells us that using even very much titles of Jesus Christ, I'm the first, I'm and the last, but that he is the Redeemer of Israel. And so, why Jesus returned, I think, is more important than when Jesus returned. Because when you understand the why, you understand why the Antichrist is trying to exterminate the Jewish people. Because without the Jews recognizing Jesus as the Messiah, Jesus doesn't come back. Like, it has nothing to do with the church. And so if he can thwart that plan, because he's very much active, Satan's very much still active. He's not just throwing in the, throwing in the towel. I'm like, well, I lost 2,000 years ago. No, he very much thinks that he can still thwart the plan. And this is that way. This is why he comes after Israel. And so, and we learn that from Hosea chapter 5, verse 15, and Hosea chapter 6, verses 1 through 3. But so anyways, the why is very important and helps us to understand also the when too, which is why we have to be out of here before Daniel's 70th week, because that's when God, shifts his focus to Israel. So
I would add to what because you brought up Samuel, and Samuel thinks that Jesus died in 33 AD.
Okay.
And Rock Islands, he made a really fantastic video, but he was saying that Jesus died in 30 AD.
Yep.
And I mean, I've seen the math for both, and I'm like, oh boy, I'm not quite 100% sure. I up until this point, up until a few months ago, I mean, I thought Jesus died in 32, and then anyway. So I think for different reasons, I would come to the same conclusion as you, even if the furthest date being 33 AD, Jesus died. I think 2,000 years later, he would wrap this whole thing up, which would be 2033. And so the latest, I really don't think we've got much more than a few years, but I'm hoping that, honestly, I love the idea. And some of the math does make sense for a 30 AD crucifixion. which would bring us to a potential 2030 wrap it all up, go to the millennial reign, and a rapture now. And the other thing that I love about 30 AD is there's a perfect 40-year gap. This is the thing that I'm having a hard time leaving the 30 AD crucifixion. Is there's a perfect 40-year gap between if he was crucified in 30 AD, then there would be 40 years between when he was crucified and when the temple was destroyed. And 40 is a very huge biblical number. There's lots of, there was 40 days and nights on the flood, and there was Jonah warning for 40 days, and Jesus fasted for 40 days, and there's lots of 40s all over the place. And so, I like that. But hey, we'll keep open-minded until we get it rock solid. And people are going to already writing their when they think Jesus died and saying all these dates, and that's the problem. It's too bad that there is.
Yeah, I think, and even to that point, I think that's another great argument why we can't know the exact day or the hour.
Yeah. People are saying my volume is too.
Yep.
Somebody said my volume's too high. I'll turn myself down a bit. But hey, go ahead, Jarrett. Yeah.
No. So and then also to your 40 connection, I think that's an excellent point. I think God uses these numbers to demonstrate his sovereignty over the very finest details. And so no matter what's happening, whether it's in the biblical times, I think he uses that as our reference point to his authenticity, and the fact that we see it playing out in real time just gives further proof to that. And so, yeah, I love that. God uses numbers. And so he wants us to pay attention to those, and as well as celestial signs. I mean, Daniel's 70th week is by definition, a mathematical prophecy. And it takes wisdom. He tells us it takes wisdom to calculate the number of the beast. I mean, and then of course there's an aspect of celestial signs. And so, both of those are very useful. And both of those, you can argue, is how the Magi found Jesus. So this stuff is very important. And unfortunately, I think the enemy has hijacked a lot of it. And so I really want us to not be afraid of this stuff. Definitely use spiritual discernment, of course. But that God put it there for a reason. And so he wants us to be intrigued by this stuff. And you always will find something deeper about God, like this example here with the 420 eclipse. I'll turn to that slide now.
I'll put that slide back up. Yeah.
Actually, just give a little setup because that won't make any sense. But Haman, right? So a lot of the Jewish scholarship, they tie the constellation of Pisces to Haman. Okay. Because it's, two fish attached by a string, right? And says so, and they quote saying, "Now I shall be able to swallow them as fish, which swallow one another." And so, from a Jewish perspective, Pisces is associated with Haman. Okay, and this is how God had made this initial connection, is because this Hitler reoccurring pattern. Oops, sorry, I hit my mic. Happens in the constellation of Pisces. Okay, and so this is how we know it's connected to Purim. We know it's connected to Haman. And so this is also the Esther element as well, if you've been watching my videos. And so there's only 2 eclipses, by the way, that solar eclipses that happen in 2023. This is the first one. The second one happens in Virgo. And I believe, personally, I'm not dying on this cross, but is that it occurs in Virgo, figuratively representing an Esther element, as it's an annular eclipse right around her hand, which a wedding ring eclipse. And so, but that basically 2023 is playing out the story of Esther in a very profound way. And so this is the first leg of that.
Yeah. Now, can you go back a few slides when that 18-year pattern? Just wanted to highlight that one more time. I don't know if you remember which. Back another that one. Yeah. So isn't that incredible that it's 9 years and 5 days from both tetrads in both
Yeah.
directions. I mean, that's a really interesting thing here.
Yes.
And also 14 was the year that those two cows had those sevens on their
Yes.
forehead, which Dale had pointed out in the live stream last week.
That's correct. That's exactly right. That's
So I
exactly right.
I think that's very interesting. 7 years of plenty on this side, 7 years of plenty. On the other side. Uh, I
Yep.
think that's an interesting connection there as well.
Yep. And
Um,
and then even to that point, the cows, the red heifer is a specific detail for the temple. And so the fact that come back here, right? So here's that millennial tetrad start, following the Israeli tetrad, pointing to the temple. That there's a connection here. This is all pointing towards a third temple and ultimately the millennial temple.
and why are you saying that Israeli Tetrad temple in 2122, and we have this physical temple that is potentially going to be built in a few months? It looks like. So how are you connecting that with this temple?
Yeah. So basically, this is one. If you remember earlier, the Saros period, if you
Hmm.
take that times 3, 54 years is
Hmm.
what even the ancient Greeks called the turn of the wheel.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's exactly it's 54 years from our 1967 set.
Mm.
So this is one Saros period later
54 years later, yeah.
from Jerusalem. And so it's almost like the bullseye has just gotten closer, right? If you're familiar with Daniel 9:24, it says, for your people, Daniel, well, that's Israel. For your holy city, well, that's Jerusalem. And then the final part of Daniel 24 says, and to anoint the most holy place. It is talking about the temple there. If you check it out in the Septuagint, uh, it's talking about the temple. So we have three aspects here mentioned in Daniel 9:24, highlighted with these eclipses. In that order, by the way. So here's your people, Daniel. Here's your holy city. Then there's everlasting to bring in everlasting righteousness, to atone for sin, and then the very last thing, excuse me, the very last thing is to anoint the most holy place. That's the holy of holies, which I won't go down the track, but it's there's a mathematical cube connection and why squares point to Christ, but nonetheless, the temple is the very last thing mentioned. And it's interesting, this separated too, because it's your holy people, your holy place, and then there's some stuff in the middle, and then the last thing is a temple. And that's exactly what you what you see kind of playing out here.
Mm.
Is you have one sorrow cycle, 18 years, 49 added up plus 18 is 67. Um, and then some other stuff that happens in the middle, and then the last statement of Daniel 9:24 is your holy place, and so, or the most holy place, and so that's a temple. And so anyways, yes, the temple is getting ready to happen. um um and so this millennial, and the fact that it falls into this, now this partial lunar eclipse is one thing that I'm glad this is right here. I prayed about, and this is a connection that he made, but that this partial lunar eclipse is actually more significant than just on the surface, just looking at it. But you notice how these all four are complete total lunar eclipses, and so are these, and so are these over here.
Hmm.
Well, right here, it's kind of weird. Okay, you got a partial one. Well, this is the what he described as the breakdown point. And so we're transitioning from this Israeli tetrad and it's ending here into this pattern here. Because remember, these started on feast days, both these sets. But now these are going to be the ones starting on the feast days. And so we're coming out of this pattern here, highlighted by here, and this breakdown here with this partial into this millennial tetrad pattern. Um, and just on an aside, just with everything going on with Germany and stuff like that, I plan on making a video. But this eclipse actually goes all the way back to the Holy Roman Emperor in 1228 AD and Germany, because his title was the King of Germany. And he was the first king of the Crusades to bring, there was like 6 or 7 Holy Crusades, right? Well, the 6th Crusade, which also number connected to the enemy, um, he was the only one to bring a peace deal in order to bring peace to Jerusalem. Okay. By settling the beef there with Islam, which is, of course, another major end time component. And so, but yeah, this particular set, or this particular partial eclipse, 126, is connected to Germany. And so it's very interesting seeing everything happening in news, and why Germany is seems to be this hinge pin in this NATO coalition going against Russia. These moons also follow. They land on the year that the guy that I forget his name, but he's the one that inspired Hitler with his anti-Semitism. Even the Roman salute, that's actually the Roman salute that Hitler would do. He picked that up from that guy. Well, the year that guy was born was part of this Saros pattern of 120, 126. And then the very next time it comes around, or maybe it's 2 times it comes around, I think it is 2 times it comes around, that's when Hitler, the very next year, Hitler comes to power, which is, yeah. So this is that Israeli tetrad pattern here. It occurred 18 years previous, just 1849 minus 1831, right? So here's that set here of the Israeli tetrad. Well, then 1 year later is the eclipse. And so this pattern, more particularly 126 Saros, seems to be connected to Germany. That's my whole point, is that it's connected to Germany. And so it's really interesting seeing everything in the news and how and why there's such an emphasis on Germany. It's almost like they kind of know too. You know, like, forget if America sends tanks, but if these guys send tanks, well, now it's too far. You know, like so it's really interesting. That's why I think today was a very profound day. I think you could make an argument that NATO has unofficially just declared war on Russia. Yeah. So that's what I got.
That's what you got. Okay, so now so Jared just went through the whole mathematical thing and lots of charts and graphs there. Now dumb it down for us, Jared.
Okay.
When's your perspective? When do you think we're out of here? And now, of course, we know we're guessing and speculating. What season are you looking at for potential departure?
That's a great question. So, you know, I have a couple of where's a good slide to go to? I might as well just let me start back at the beginning.
Sure, I'll put it on the screen here.
Oh my, okay. I don't have a slide that represents this. So let me just okay. So for me, I guess Purim would be a very interesting time. It could all which is Adar, okay, which begins 2/22. So that could be significant for that reason. And as I'm attaching the rapture to war, nuclear war specifically, actually, I'm not. It's kind of difficult. There's a couple components. So Venus, for example, may be why it's playing into this. Recently with the green comet and the year of the rabbit, Venus right now is an evening setting position, which is also tied to war. So it could be any moment. It could be tomorrow, for all I know. So there's that. But once that dips below, what's the next season? Yeah, I would say Purim, Adar, the 12th month. If it's not that, then coming back to Venus being in Leo, because that's when World War I officially kicked off and World War II officially kicked off. There's a small window in July that it could happen. Yeah. It could also happen in October.
Yeah.
And so, but I also think there's some drop dead dates that it can't, go past. But I don't really know. I guess that's just the kind of window that I'm looking at. I think 2023 is a perfectly valid entire year.
Yeah.
I'm about 90. I had to put a percentage on it.
I'd say about
95% 2023. For 5% 2024, 2025. Then I'm just gonna quit YouTube and I'll take all my videos down. And, because there are some interesting celestial signs in 2024 for sure. But what's interesting, if you follow this Chinese zodiac, actually you pointed out in one of your videos, the very next Chinese zodiac animal is the year of the dragon. And so
we got a question here. I don't know if you can see this, but Brother Jared, I wonder if these dates are sinusoidal. Can they be plotted where the wavelength of years is the same? Do you understand that question?
Oh, where did there's a question right there. Okay, I wonder if these dates are sinusoidal. Yeah, yes, there absolutely are. I mean, if you where they go up and down, yes, actually. So it'd be like that first slide that I had, where basically year 9 would be its transition going back down underneath on the sign. Sorry, but window here. Okay, so 9 years up and then 9 years down for your whole sign there. So yes, you could absolutely, and we know that because of this eclipse that's occurring in 420. But it's interesting because it actually ties lunar eclipses versus solar eclipses, and so there would actually be a reverse. You could have solar eclipses and lunar eclipses. But anyways, for our particular example, you have the lunar eclipse, and then 9 years later, at the halfway point, right before it dips under, is our Hitler eclipse, and then it comes back around 9 years later, and the moons themselves complete the whole sorrow cycle. But in the middle, at the first phase of your sine wave, is marked by this eclipse. So yeah, you could absolutely track this through a sine wave. Circles are very significant. Pi, which is a unitless constant, by the way, because if you have a phone, okay, if you have one, it's your diameter of a phone. It take 3.14 phones to make a circumference. So it's a very profound constant in mathematics. So is E, by the way. Shares very similar characteristics, but that's only because God created it, and so it demonstrates that there's things in mathematics that are conundrums, I guess you want to say that, paradoxes, and a pi is one of those. So, anyways, yes. So yes,
very nice. Let's get out of here, man. Let's get raptured. Aye. Okay, back to being sophisticated. Question, Jarrett. This is Pamela. Do you think there's a gap between the rapture and the trib starting? So much chaos. Rapture occurs with millions gone, EMs, doctors, and planes and crashes, etc. Gap. Me personally, I'll just say yes. I think there's a gap. What do you think, Jarrett?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you see totally two different scenarios being set up. In one instance, Paul talks about sudden destruction, and then yet we know the 70th week starts with a covenant with many. And so it's almost like as if the covenant with many only makes sense if there's chaos beforehand. And so, yeah, I would absolutely agree with Brother Aaron that you have to have a gap in order for that to make sense.
Yeah, for me, I'm personally going with a minimum of 6 months. And
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, even if the tribulation was, let's say, 26 to 33, it'd still be reasonable to have like a 2-year gap or something like that before.
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
So I think because we need to understand what you brought up, Daniel, earlier: 924, 925, 926, 927, 927. It doesn't start the rapture. The tribulation does not start with the rapture. That's not day one. The day one is this covenant. This covenant deal. Covenant with many. And how do you get to that covenant with many? Something catastrophic has to happen well before that, I believe. And so I like the 180-day gap before a trib myself, and that's why this eclipse jumped out at me. But I wanted to bring up Stellarium too, because Jarrett brought up something, and I can you see that? Okay. Yeah. So you brought up. We're gonna go over to Leo. Where is Leo? There is Leo. And so Venus, when World War I happened, Venus was in Leo. And when World War II happened, Venus was in Leo. And so now what we're doing is, when is Venus in Leo again? So there it is in July. Oops. Let's do this so we don't lose track of where we're at. Oh, let's go like this. Let's see if it's going to happen here. So yeah, so there it is in July. Oh, it's moving. Here, let's do this. And let's do that again. And then it's also there. When is it again? In October, I believe, right?
Yep. Exactly on the day of the eclipse, it's in there. So the October 14th.
There it
Yeah,
is.
there
Yeah,
it is. Yep.
the 14th. So it's there both in July of this year and it's in there in October as well. So
Mhm.
so should we still be here past these spring feasts, then these are some other days to consider.
Yep.
War starting. But actually, this is my speculation date of when the covenant will be signed.
Okay.
October 15th ish, because that's 7 prophetic years back from Day of Atonement.
Mhm.
So, and it's also a 68 day. So, take it for what it's worth. It's a bunch of speculation there.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. Okay. So I'll put
Yes.
it.
Yes. And yeah, there's a lot of yeah, this is a very interesting sign. And then and one thing too is it's also kind of difficult, I think, to necessarily hold on a date because the Venus was on one side of Leo and on another side of Leo, but granted, it was all in Leo for World War One and World War Two. So I think it'd be difficult necessarily to set a date. But if I had to take a bet, okay, and if you wanted me to hold me to a rapture date, even though I'm totally against rapture date setting, I would place a point 0.0001% bet on 7/11. I just like that date, just because of Genesis and the 7/11, and it's there. I like 7/11, but again, that's a point zero zero zero
Mhm,
zero
mhm.
one percent chance that I mean I wouldn't place any money on it. I wouldn't bet any crypto on it. I wouldn't put any stocks on it.
There you go.
I wouldn't quit my job on it. Okay, I need to pay bills, so that's how much weight I'm putting on it. I just like it. It's a cool date.
I like the idea of us getting out here before Passover myself.
Yeah.
I like the idea of the triumphal entry, Nissan 10. I like the idea of us up there before Passover. But anyway, I like Purim. That's a great, yeah, I like it all. Okay, question, Jarrett. How do
Yeah,
you think the vertical rapture will happen? We will be surrounded by an energy field beam, or will we just be lifted up?
that's a great question. I do not know. The only reference that I have is that rapture vision I discussed in my previous video, and I don't remember seeing any light. It was just, I mean, I wasn't even outside like looking up the stars. I was in my room, so I don't think we have to go outside looking up, just like, oh, I hope I don't miss the bus or something like that. But I didn't see anything like that, so I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. This I don't know.
I do like the theory that Samuel presented again in a live stream. He was talking about Matthew 24 and the gathering of the
Mhm,
elect from the four winds, and he's pointing that towards basically the Jews. That
mhm,
essentially what Samuel was getting at was the rapture happens before the 7 year trib, and the gathering of the Jews potentially would be on Feast of Trumpets,
mhm,
10 days before Jesus actually comes back at the second coming.
mhm.
And so that was what Jared was referring to as a horizontal rapture. Is that what you were getting at, implying that kind of a theme?
Say that again.
So in Matthew 24, I think it's around 31 when he says he gathers the elect from the four corners.
Yeah, I argue that's Israel.
That's what Samuel was saying. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Near the end of the trib, like 10 days
yeah,
before the end, and just gathering them before the second coming.
yeah. I think it's difficult to necessarily define like elect or saints as one particular group. I think if we just see that they're umbrella terms, to represent like just a group of people, like the church just means a called out people, like Noah was called out of the times before the flood. Israel was called out of Egypt. So there's a church of Noah, there's a church of Israel. Like it's just a call. It's a generalized term to as God way is pointing out a specific special group of people. So so for me, when people are, the elect, I don't think that you can necessarily say, oh, that's just a church. Like it's just, I think it's just a way to just highlight a special group of people. And the fact that Jesus' whole ministry was to Israel and not the Gentiles, he himself tells us that everything that he explains is through that lens. And so, especially in Matthew 24, he's talking about, that's why he's talking about the abomination of desolation in the holy place. When you see that happening, that's a very Jewish thing, because his whole, perspective is through Israel. So, in the kingdom gospel and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's like it.
We have another question from Amor Poya. Sorry if I said it wrong. Do you think there will be a great worldwide earthquake when the dead in Christ rise up?
Ooh, that's a good one. Aaron, what are your thoughts?
Well, I love I love the connection with the rapture on Passover for this very reason.
Okay.
Because when Jesus died on the cross, there was an earthquake, and the dead in Christ rose and walked around the town, and they're like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa!" So I love the parallel there of a Passover rapture for that very reason.
Okay.
So we're getting into a can of worms here, but some people think that the rapture is connected with Seal 6. And some people don't, but that's a massive earthquake there. And there's lots of earthquake settings in Revelation. Which ones are the same, which ones are different.
Sure.
But my plain simple answer is, yeah, I think there's going to be an earthquake, and I think it's going to be nuts. It's going to be a crazy day,
Yep.
and I think it's going to be an escape from sudden destruction. And literally, like, bombs are flying and going nuts, and we're out of here. We're going to be smelling like fire on the way up. I think that's. What's your perspective?
I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I think that there's definitely earthquakes, of course. I guess I'm kind of looking at an earthquake. It may be that earthquake that Jesus refers to, or Revelation 6, the sixth seal refers to. But I think as for an America judgment, I think that there's an earthquake tied to that. One series that I have is called the Amos Code. And all the warning signs that God gave the Northern Kingdom matched the warning signs that we're seeing right now. There was fires and floods and droughts, and the final two judgments was an attack by a foreign nation, and then the other one was a great earthquake. And so Amos 1:1 starts out with this is the prophet. I'm just paraphrasing. Prophet Amos, to the Northern Kingdom 2 years before the great earthquake. And so I definitely think that God will use an earthquake as one of his. It's just my speculation. It's just a conjecture. I'm not, but that there's an earthquake tied to America's judgment.
We've talked about this question earlier in this channel, but why don't we give a percentage for this man here, another watchman, TOL. Aaron Jarrett, do you think the second coming happens in the fall of 2030? What's your percentage of that, Jarrett? What's your percentage of that? What do you think?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think that's a very valid window. Absolutely. I think 2030, I think 2029 is a valid window for Jesus to return. I just know that at least at a bare minimum, 2032, 2033, we have to be in the millennial year. As there's a feast that's necessarily tied to it. That's the Feast of Tabernacles. I think it's in Ezekiel, but essentially once a year, like ambassadors from every nation have to come to Israel, right, to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. So, and that's a temple celebration. So, so I don't know. I don't know when Jesus returns, like the year, because there's, I think, some ambiguity there on if it was 29 AD or 30 AD or 31 AD or 32 AD. I just know 2032, 2033 millennium has to be in full swing. Rules laid out. Hey, this is what we're doing, guys.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat with you here, but based on what we're seeing here, I don't think that this whole war setup is going to just go. I think it's going to speed up pretty quick now, and
I think so.
I think we got a good chance for the second coming to happen in 2030 as a result. And I think for me, 33 would be the tail end of my thing with the second coming, and so I think we're in that real sweet spot of the gap. And we'll be surprised if we go in the next couple days or weeks too. Like,
Which, real quickly, by the way, the last that was Brother Mike from Another Watchman, TOL, that just posed that question. Check out his channel. Okay, he just dropped a really, really interesting video about the year of the rabbit, and
Oh, cool.
and how it's a water rabbit. It's in fact, I even had to revamp my video that I'm getting ready to come out with now because of a water connection tied to the labor aspect. Of moving into this war rapture, that we're in this war rapture labor pains, and that's exactly what my video is about. And so big shout out to brother Mike there for finding those very unique details about the year of the rabbit. So yeah, definitely check out his channel too. It's really, really good.
What do we have here? You up for a few more questions, Jet?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But yeah.
Do you think the rapture will happen on a normal day or one filled with chaos? I suppose we sort of answered that earlier, but what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's sudden destruction. I think it comes as a thief a thief in the night, and that it's actually a really great question. I go through my news feed on Facebook, and I just see people talking about the most mundane things, like who's going to do the postseason and what's on TV. And I'm just like, like we were very close to, being in open war with Russia here. And it's very interesting to me. So yeah, I think that it could be any day, and that it really honestly is going to take people by surprise, at least here in America. I don't know what the feeling is around the world and other nations, but at least here for the American culture, I think it's definitely going to catch people by surprise for sure.
Yeah, me too. We'll go on to the next question. So you think we'll be gone before any wars, or could the rapture happen right after the start of war? What's your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. So I think it's necessarily tied to nuclear war. This channel Isaiah 53, and I put this in my video here. I'm telling them the whole video here, but so the other time that Paul talks about the rapture, in a moment, in a twinkling. So moment, the Greek word that's used there is atomo, which is where we get the Greek, or which is where we get the word atomic from, for like atomic bomb. And so that in a moment, in a twinkling, is in conjunction with 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, sudden destruction, that there's a play on like nuclear war and sudden destruction. And so, yeah, I think at the exact as soon as the bombs, we have to be out of here. I think we have to be out of here.
I agree. And but listen, at the same time, we're not guaranteed a beautiful life, and we are not guaranteed. We could all die today, and so this is a good time to say, hey,
Mm-hmm.
you got to believe in your heart, confess with your mouth that Jesus Christ died for your
Mm-hmm.
sins,
Mm-hmm.
and you shall be saved. Okay, so do that today. If you're listening and you're like, I don't know
Yes,
about
please,
Jesus,
soon.
I don't know. Jesus is just some guy that no. He's everything. He is your key to heaven, to eternal life. There's only one key that can unlock your door, and that's Jesus. He's your key. He's your everything. And
Amen.
so enter into that relationship with him. And
So I feel bad looking in the camera. Sorry,
and
guys.
and Jarrett has a channel. His channel is Supernatural by Design. Somebody asked that, so wanted to point that out. And what else do we have for a question here? Everything changes at Passover. Okay, Rapture Near Looking Up says everything changes at Passover. They are wanting a sacrifice real bad. Possible
Yep.
covenant to allow the sacrifice. Yeah, isn't that crazy? They want a sacrifice on Passover. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Again, because of the turn of the wheel tetrad, it's pointing to a temple. So absolutely, I'm not surprised at all that this is happening. In fact, I'm expecting it, to be quite honest. And what's even really interesting to that point in Esther is that red heifers their ashes were burned on the first day of Adar, in order that they're prepared for the first day of Nisan for Passover. So it's very interesting, even the red heifers aspect, because that indirectly ties to Purim as well. So it's really the whole thing is just, and not to mention, it's also a detail in Daniel's 70th week, right? When it talks about the daily sacrifices and grain offerings, it's a bad translation. It's actually libation offerings. It's actually talking about ashes, right? And from a red heifer. So this whole red heifer connection is a direct detail in Daniel's middle of the 70-week prophecy. So absolutely, there's no way that we are in Daniel's 70th week right now. That it's just yeah. So anyways, but the ashes are very specific detail called out in Daniel 9:27 specifically.
Yeah. Now, this is not a question, it's a statement, but I think this is an interesting topic as well. Musk is seeing FDA approval for human trials for the brain chip this April. Thank you, Sonic 720, for writing this. We are very
Mm,
close to the point of no return, let alone all other
heck
signs.
yeah. Yep.
They've been actually doing this brain chip thing in
Yeah.
I think it was 21. What's the company called? Sinster or something. Sin something.
Mm-hmm.
They've already started doing this before Neuralink, doing
Mm-hmm.
this pattern, and
Mm-hmm.
there's people that are able to basically sit in their living room and email people and text people and do their banking on their couch just by thinking it, right? So,
Yeah.
isn't this nuts? I mean, how much further can this get with all this transhumanism too? With
Oh,
I don't know how much you're into that, Jarrett, but
no, I mean, so I think to some degree, Jesus expects us not only to understand the significance of Israel aspect, but also the rise of the beast system. I think that's another unique detail that he calls us to pay attention to. And I base it on Revelation chapter 12, verse 17. I'm sorry, verse 17, verse 12, um, where it talks about that for 1 hour, the beast and the 10 kings will rule the earth, right? Well, in Revelation 3, whether you want to go with like 11, 10 or 11, or I think it's verse 3 in chapter 3, but he talks about this single hour, right? And so we know that this hour is attached to these 10 kings and this beast system. So when we see all these different dynamics of the beast system getting ready to get, it's like it's tightening in, you know what I'm saying? So I think to some degree, Jesus expects us to pay attention to the beast system as it's getting closer and closer. Absolutely.
Yeah, I love. I almost did a video on the hour and
Uh-huh.
how there's many times when it says the hour in Book of Revelation and in Daniel. When
Hmm.
you go back to the root words, there's this hour of this, the hour of that,
Yep.
and the hour of trial is here, and that's
Yep.
part of the reason why we're out of here before the hour of trial, because that's I think it's a Revelation 3, 10 or 11,
Yep.
somewhere in that area. Uh,
Yep.
I'm going to keep you from the hour of trial.
Yep.
But also in Revelation 14, we've got these angels saying, the hour of temptation has come.
Yep.
Somewhere around verse 8 in Revelation 14, and
Hmm.
Babylon is fallen, and
Yes.
the whole structure is fallen essentially,
Uh-huh.
and so well with what nuclear war, you would
Yep.
think, you know,
Yep.
um,
And I saw one in the comments, cryptocurrency. I mean, there's a lot of different things that are showing. I think facial recognition is another one. Like there's so many different elements coming to the forefront. Um, and what's interesting is most of it is using technology. So that even gives us a, a foundation why the world can't just necessarily just everyone's in nuclear war, because you have to have some sort of infrastructure set up to
yep,
support
yeah,
that.
you've got to
So
have something, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. What are your thoughts on the head of the year being in March rather than
Ooh, it's a
September?
good question. Um, I don't know. I know that personally, just my opinion is that oh man, Aaron, why don't you go first? I don't.
Well,
I have an opinion, but I just.
I mean, in Exodus, when they're doing the Passover,
Hmm.
God says, "Okay, this is the beginning of your year now,"
Yep.
and so okay, there's an argument there. Are we still in 2022? My calendar doesn't say so, so I'm not the guy that's gonna say we're still in 22. Although, man, did I love 22? Oh man, I thought the rapture was in 22.
Yeah.
I mean, the patterns are there, and maybe God was just saying that was the last year of normal.
Yeah.
I don't know. But no, well, in my mind, hey, I see 23 on my calendar, so that's the year we're in.
Yeah.
But having said that, is Nissan 1 the beginning of the year to God? Well, only God knows that, but it's an interesting question to ask, isn't it?
It's interesting. It's the beginning of the year for Israel, right? It's not the beginning of the year for the Gentile nation. So I think that is one unique aspect about it. But to that point, is it September? I don't know. I think it's definitely a valid question for sure. People have asked me about the different calendar. I think that there's some truth. There has to be only one correct calendar. I agree. But it appears that God is also using the error in these other calendars to kind of funnel us into the same window. Like the Gregorian calendar, for example. We know that's off, but yet 1948 matches 1948 with Abraham, in the Bible. We know that the Hebrew year itself, we know we're not in, was it 2583? No, 27, something 83. Well, we know that that's at least off probably by 200 years. But yet, if you do that, we are no longer necessarily in a Jubilee year, right? It only makes sense if you use the Hebrew years the way that there are now. So I think there's definitely a lot of truth even in the errors in these calendars. And so where you start these calendars, it's definitely a very valid 5783. Thank you. It's definitely a very valid question. I definitely agree with that. But I don't know. I mean, I think it's just a valid question. I don't know. I personally don't know. I think we're all close. Whether it's we're 6 months off, sure. Sure. I'll go with that.
Yeah, again, let's get out of here, man. Hey.
Yeah.
Okay, so somebody sent me this too. Song of Solomon, I think chapter 2, verse 13. There's something that says green figs, green figs. I believe it's green figs. But when you add up the Hebrew letters for that particular phrase, that's green figs, it equals 83. And that's a very Rapture verse. I can get it out and read it, but essentially that whole chapter is Rapture, come away with me and all this kind of stuff. And it's giving you the season of the green figs. But that particular word in Hebrew, and I'm not Hebrew, so I couldn't really explain it properly unless I got the charts and everything. But essentially that it equals 83. And so here we are in 5783. And,
Yes.
and it's coming on the season of spring. So that's worth talking about in the next couple of weeks too, and bringing that stuff back up. There's a question here. Username okay guy here. Real question. Are we living in the tribulation? Yes or no? And that's a very valid question. I think it's worth answering. Me personally, I would say no. This is going to be the worst judgment in the history of humanity.
Yeah.
So yes, cheese is 40 cents more than it was last year, and milk is $1.87 more than last year. But that doesn't mean we're in the tribulation. There's no butter on the shelf for 2 weeks. It doesn't mean you're in tribulation. What's your perspective here, Jarrett?
Yeah, no, I think the Bible is very clear on this topic. It starts with the sign of a covenant, with many, and so that hasn't happened yet, and so technically, by definition, we can't be in it just yet. And then again, I always refer that the 70 weeks is only pertaining to Israel. I know that there's a technical reason why we're not in the last 7 years. If you again go back to read Daniel, don't just take my word for it. Definitely go check this stuff out. But when you read Daniel 9:24, the prophecy is for your people, Daniel, and that's not us. So that's why we can't be in the 70th week. It has nothing to do with us. So therefore, we can't be in the tribulation because God hasn't shifted his focus yet. So. And so that's just, that's where I'm at.
I apologize if I missed anybody's questions.
Well, these are great questions, by the way. I love these. These are awesome.
Okay, let's try this one. I think this is one that I might have missed. So, okay, Simone question: the moon's distance from Earth expands 1.5 inches a year. Okay, could this point towards how we'll be vertically raptured? Astronomical event affecting gravity and the moon. I don't know anything about this myself. So, Jarrett, do you have any opinion on that?
I'm not sure. Expands. I know it's drifting away from the Earth at a very slow rate, which also, just on a side note, points to why uh, nothing is millions and millions of years old, because the moon had already be gone. But nonetheless, I'm not sure expanding. I'm not sure I quite understand that question. If totally want to maybe clarify, so I understand that question. It seems like a great question. I'm not understanding the expanding aspect. I can look something up.
Yeah. Now, this is not a question, it's a statement. Donnelly says, Mystery Babylon falls in 1 hour.
That's very interesting. Yep.
Yeah. Now, the timing of when it falls, I think
Yep.
that's interesting. I think that's a very interesting topic. When and who and how, I think that's
Yep.
very, very tied
Yep.
to rapture events. But I can certainly see how this world can fall in 1 hour because of all, like I said, all the missiles and all the nukes that are just available to all these countries, you know.
Right.
Um,
I'm sorry. I'm really bad looking at the camera, y'all. I apologize.
Oh, no, this is fun. People are loving it. I'm loving it. I appreciate you, brother. I'm just trying to skim over here and see if there's any other questions or anything like that.
You said I meant drifting away. Yes. 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 No. Okay. Yes. No. It is drifting away. So will it be like that? I'm not. Yes. I mean, the rapture, I would argue, for the church is a vertical rapture. Um, I don't. Hopefully that answers your question. I'm not sure, but yeah.
We've got Scottish Heather saying, "Wouldn't eating, drinking, and marrying showing a normal day exclude a war scenario?" Well, you know, there's the argument to say we are running out of normal days
Yep.
before the rapture can even occur. What's your thoughts on that, Jared?
Yeah, so I think there's a reason why there's a thief in the night aspect here, right? Is because people are unaware, just like the flood. When the flood came, they didn't know. They laughed at Noah, said, "Rain, really? Okay, right." But when it happened, people were like, "Oh, snap! This stuff is real." So, yeah, absolutely. When I think, because that's exactly what I was kind of mentioning in my news feed on Facebook, was that that's exactly what I see, is just this normal, mundane kind of move through the world, and not realizing the closeness of nuclear war. I think we're definitely seeing Bible prophecy, just by people's sentiment of everyday life. Um, and so, yeah, I think, but we're watching. As believers, we're watching for His return. So it's not a surprise. We see there's something off happening. We see this tension increasing, and I've always kind of been on the side that it can't be like Russia just starts, firing at Sweden and firing at Finland. If you want to be precise about it, you got to take out the big dog, because the rest of the little dogs are going to fall in line, So, so yeah, and that will come quick. That's not going to be like, hey, we're getting ready to bomb you guys, okay? Like it's because of the challenge that America would totally bring. So it kind of has to be a surprise attack, like a Pearl Harbor attack type situation. And
Another
so
thing.
that's so yeah.
Another thing to add too would be, again, Biden said in his speech today that the U.S. is heading this up, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that complements what you just said there. You got to take out the big dog. You got to take out the head cheese there.
Yeah.
And so I think we got to get. I think the States has got to be a non-player
Yep.
very fast.
Yep.
And what that looks like, I'm not 100% sure
Yep.
how much destruction or economic or collapse, or I don't know exactly what that looks like. It's got to be. It's got to be
I don't think
taken.
it's the whole. I don't think it's like. But something. Yeah, something. Because
Something.
it's no longer a player in the end times. It totally switches from really Western nations. Sorry, the Western Hemisphere, as being the dominant. Everything is centered in Israel. Whether you're talking about Russia or the Islamic nations, it's very much centered on over there. So something has to happen over here to where we're of no effect.
Dale Jones, Dale, giving us a hard question. Do you think Joshua 8 and the Israelites' battle with the city of Ai is a typology of a future battle against artificial intelligence? Yikes! What do you think about that?
Oof, that's a good one. The only thing I would say is that absolutely there's patterns in Bible prophecy, And so to say that it's not, I think would be disingenuous of how patterns are played out in the Bible. So I don't know.
Here we got.
That's a great question, though.
Yeah, that's a good question. Rusty Nail says, to all those who do not think we are at World War III, what do they want to call it? That we are just playing cowboys and Indians?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're so close. I think we're there. We're
Yeah.
there without saying it. You know.
Yeah. I mean, Russia has over and over again said, "Hey, we're gonna global catastrophe." You know, I mean, if you go back a little bit, you know, when we first started this whole, "Hey, let's provide weapons to Ukraine," it was only like, well, they're only going to be defensive weapons. We're not doing planes. We're not doing tanks. That's too much. That will for sure start World War III. And here we are today. You know, so the very things that we said that we weren't going to do are now the things we're doing. You know, we're close. We're very close. Unfortunately, but you know, God's mercy is profound, and there's a reason why it's delayed. You know, the very last soul that will accept Christ on this side.
I'm just zipping through the comments one more time. Sorry, I'm just a bit quiet here.
Oh, this is great. I love this. This is fantastic. This is excellent questions too.
Okay, this is a kind of a crucial thing. Okay, is the jab the MOG?
No.
Yeah. So,
No.
you know, when it first came out, we were okay. You know what? Look, maybe we shouldn't even talk about this.
Okay.
But you know what, guys? Don't worship Satan, okay? And don't take it. This thing that came out is bad news.
Yes.
Bad for your health. Not going to help you out at all.
That's right.
But look, the question beyond this question is: are you going to hell? That's
the main point.
That's the bigger question here, and the bigger how you go to hell through this whole thing at the end is you take the mark of the beast and you worship Satan. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the biggest concern here. And so, first of all, we're not in tribulation. Therefore, the mark of the beast is not here.
Yep.
Now, this is bad news, super bad news, very bad news. Don't get it, in my opinion. But you know, there's a 2-part thing going on here, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got to take this actual mark of the beast, and you've got to knowingly take it, I believe, as well.
Yep.
Because there's angels flying around saying, "Don't take this."
Mm-hmm.
So I'll admit, when it first came out, I was very confused myself. I was like, man, I don't know. I'm not sure, man. I'm not sure what's going on here. But now it's like, okay, yeah, we're not in trib, so therefore it can't be. And
that's right.
But yeah, what's your perspective, Jarrett?
No, I think I completely 100% agree. I did notice someone saying this like a test run. I would completely agree with that. I think it's definitely a psychological conditioning happening here. I think it more than likely will take out a lot of people as well. But the mark of the beast, no. For the reasons that you also laid out. In addition, there's no beast. There's no Antichrist. Right. And so this is in worship. There's a religious aspect even being applied with it. There's nothing religious here about taking you know, the thing there. Secondly, there's no false prophet. Right. So you don't even have the players there for this to be that. And so, but is it bad? Absolutely. Is it probably going to kill a whole lot? Probably so. And I have a theory about why it's actually being more targeted towards Western nations, to be quite honest. And that's because of the history of Christianity. Because when the Antichrist comes on the scene, you would want as few people being familiar with the Bible in order to deceive more people. Do you see what I'm saying? And so the fact that there's a targeted attack on historically Western Christian nations, that makes sense because, you know, like Africa's not taking it. You know, so the less people you know, knowledge is power kind of thing, you know. So that's just my thoughts. That's just a conjecture.
So here's another thing to kind of explain this theme, and I put this question up too because it's a good question. But before we move on to that question, so this whole tribulation, why is it happening? This might actually answer this mark of the beast thing too. Why is this tribulation happening? And Okay, part of the reason why God blows things up in the Old Testament many
Mm-hmm.
times, and I say that because he just destroys things. When people
Mm-hmm.
worship other gods, other idols,
Mm-hmm.
other idol worship, he hates it. I mean, he gets mad at that kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you can go. There's countless situations, but one example is they built that golden cow in the wilderness, and they went into worship it, and
Yeah.
God was furious. He was
Mm-hmm.
furious. What are you
Absolutely.
guys doing? And actually, the
Yeah.
first two commandments, don't have any other gods before me, and do not worship idols. Don't worship anything else but me. And
Mm-hmm.
so now, okay, that's the rule at the beginning. Well, let's go to the end. What does Satan want us to do? Or what does he want humanity to do? Worship
Mm-hmm.
him. That's the
Mm-hmm.
whole point, because that's
Yep.
what God hates. And
Yep.
so it's a combination of uh, basically getting permanently stamped knowingly, I believe, and
Yes.
the combination of this complete what angers God pretty much the most is the worship of other gods. And
Right.
not only is it the worship of the God, but it's the worship of Satan, right?
Right.
So so it's like pick your side, pick God or
Yeah.
Satan,
Absolutely.
and so that's the more important question than is this. I mean, this it's that you have to go up more. Why is this all happening? Why,
Right.
But anyway, let's go on to Lee's question. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts
Sure.
about
Yeah.
all the planes being grounded the other day?
Yeah.
I think that was a test run on an EMP. That's my personal perspective. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that was an accident. People are saying, "Oh, it's a solar flare." Yeah, I don't think so. I think that was a test run
Oh,
before they do their strike. Because again, if Babylon's going to fall in an hour, they're going to want to make sure they can get rid of their electric grid first, and then take care of business. What's your thought, Jarrett?
yeah. No, I completely agree. I think it actually is a lot more profound than what the media is because I was up. Okay, I was working on a video and my internet started lagging. In fact, a couple times it went out. YouTube was going out. So this was more than just the airplanes. I was even having problems with YouTube. Um, Probably around about 8:30 in the morning, and then 9 o'clock. If I finally had no longer had a network issue to show real stats. So this was more than just planes. Um, I yeah.
I think so too. Yeah.
And what's interesting is these are the kind of um, types of situations that ramp up. It's kind of like the war that's behind closed doors, and then someone's finally going to be like, "All right, we're shooting." Like these these are your behind closed door punches. I personally think it was. I mean, it could have been Russia, North Korea. Someone did something. It's definitely not an accident. In fact, it even happened there in Canada, correct?
I'm not aware of what was going on in Canada, but yeah, I don't think it was just some natural disaster or something like that. I think that was a planned thing. So,
Mm.
um,
Ooh,
all right, Jarrett, you go first. This is the
oof.
hot topic. Don't get mad at each other. I'm still your friend, whatever you say, brother. What do you think
I
Babylon is?
think
USA, Rome, Vatican, or Middle East?
you
Or
know.
something else? Or is it your mailman's dog?
I don't know. I think I have two. I actually like brother Aaron what you stated with your position. I could totally see that. I think the only other one, I think there's three possibilities. I think yours is definitely a potential for sure. So I'll let you speak to that one. The other one that it could be um, is it's not yet on the scene yet, and that's why it's a mystery. I know some have speculated the line that Saudi Arabia is eventually, trying to do. So it could be something yet future still. I'm not sure. Is it Rome? It could possibly. I've even heard, it's the secret societies. And so the fact that they're all spread out everywhere, there's a reason why it appears that it's nations, but yet it's really more the people that are in those nations doing those things. Such as like the structure of like Washington D.C. and all that kind of stuff and yet or Rome with the Vatican and the obelisk, which is Egypt and stuff, and the stuff that's tied to that, and now I'm referring to the Nephilim stuff. I don't know. I think, brother Aaron, you have probably my direction that I'm leaning in. So
I,
why don't you?
you know what? Hey, I'm going with 90% that it's. I think New York is the best representation of Babylon.
Okay.
I mean, but you know, I think my main point is I think USA has to dissolve pretty quick, very fast.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. That's the end of the at the end of the day. That's my main point.
Sure.
We know that the Vatican is pretty brutal. We
Yep.
know that. Um, Now, one thing to note though is when it says hills in Revelation, some translations say mountains, and
Uh-huh.
when you go to the Old Testament and you look at the word mountain, it's often associated with nations.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you read the text there in Revelation, is it 17? Yeah, it's 17. Yeah. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Talking about the description of Babylon and the kings and the mountains and all these kinds of things. It's
Mm-hmm.
really speaking of the way I read it. It's speaking of nations, and it's not talking about seven literal hills.
Mm-hmm.
And Rome sits on seven hills now. But Rome is the Vatican is certainly bad news,
Yeah.
and it's part of this whole system too. So,
Absolutely.
maybe it's all connected in some sort of way. But I think my my end game point is I think that the states has to crumble pretty quick,
Yep.
and maybe perhaps on Rapture Day, which is the reason why we're zipping out of here, kind of thing.
Yeah. There's definitely a reason why there's a mystery attached to it. If it was straightforward, you, you know, there wouldn't be mystery in front of Babylon. If it was just necessarily ancient Babylon, then I'm like, hey, Babylon. But the
Right?
fact that
Yeah.
the Holy
Yeah.
Spirit uses the word mystery, because there's a mystery there. I mean,
Yeah.
Paul uses that word mystery.
That's right.
We're explaining theology and some of the new revelations to him. So I don't know. Yeah, I kind of think if I had to, since we're the war rapture and everything, and the fact that it gets taken out in an hour, which is also kind of what I'm leaning towards as far as this whole war scenario. I mean, to some degree, it fits that pattern as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. We're gonna find out soon enough.
You got that right. Except from the mezzanine. We're going to be.
Yep. If it's flat Earth or round Earth, or if it's U.S. or Rome or
Yeah,
Egypt
you got that right.
or Canada is Babylon or Mexico is Babylon
Yeah.
or all right, I'm gonna see if there's any more questions. I could zip
Yeah.
over
Great
here.
questions. I like these questions.
I would say, guys, don't be afraid to think, consider things, change your perspective,
Yeah.
research. When you're studying, ask questions and say, could it be possible?
Yep.
I
Yeah.
always start my studies with, is it possible
Yeah.
that such and such is the way that it is? Is it possible?
Yep.
Because if you start going off with statements like saying, I know it's this way, and
Yeah.
I know it's that way for sure,
Yeah.
well, then you're not going to change your perspective. You're not going to grow with that. So,
Yep.
is it
Especially if
possible?
you find passages that contradict that perspective.
Mhm.
Um, because the Bible can't contradict itself, right? So there has to be. Then that means there's an error in our understanding about what is being told in this particular passage. So I completely agree. I know I personally, and God's, when I've been praying, is there's some things that I need to step back as far as my necessarily conclusions, because they, like the Feast of Trumpets necessarily with Paul. Because he doesn't actually say the Feast of Trumpets. He doesn't say the feast. He just uses the word trumpets. Is tying it to the Feast of Trumpets, a human tradition that's been assumed there. And so, yeah, I completely agree. I think it takes lifetimes to understand the Bible. I think it's very difficult to know it all in one lifetime. So, that's just my perspective. That's all I got.
John asked, do you think the third temple is close to being constructed? Well, I think that the Antichrist needs to stand in a temple to
Yes.
declare himself God, and it
Yep.
looks like it's going to be built soon. They're going to have to get through some legal matters to do that. But what are your thoughts on that, Jarrett?
Yeah, absolutely. I because of the Israeli tetrad. It's a full turn of the wheel. from the Jerusalem tetrad. So 54 years. And so I was talking about this back in 2021. So the fact that all this stuff is happening, I'm not surprised at all. I'm actually expecting temple movement because of that. So yes, I think we're very close. I think even if you want to take a step further from 2014 with the cows, Brother Dale outlined that very eloquently last week. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and somebody said, you think these these V's are the result of sudden deaths? Yeah, basically, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This V thing has been very bad for our culture and society. But we won't get into that too much. We got to be careful. I'm so far, knock on wood. I'm lucky, haven't got any strikes yet, so we're doing well with that. Let's see what Dave said here. Dave 22 says, "How do people not see what's going on?" Second Thessalonians
Yep.
is an interesting point, Dave. And how do people not see it?
That's a great question.
People. He says he'll give them over to delusion in Second Thessalonians chapter 2, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the mind of God, but I think he knows who. This is a loaded question. I think he knows who's are his, and who
Yes.
are inevitably going to decide not to pick the Jesus team, and he's going to give them
Yep.
over to delusion. And
Yep.
there are some super smart friends and people that I know that I'm like, I don't understand how you cannot see this. And my only answer is, God must be giving them over to delusion. I can't explain it
Yeah.
any other way. Well, but how do you see that, Jared?
Yeah. No, I think so. I think that's well. I think you have definitely that. It's God giving him over to a strong delusion, but I mean, even leading up to that, I mean, it says that Satan has blinded the world. So there's definitely a spiritual aspect to everything, and why I think right now is the best time to witness to unbelievers, because the time is close. It's interesting. I was eating lunch with someone, and they had mentioned that critical thinking is tied to the Holy Spirit,
Oh, wow.
and I thought it was very profound. And so, like, I know everyone was when we're talking about the the stuff, like who opened their eyes to, like, hey, there's a red flag here, whether you agree, or disagree on, how, but MOTB, but still you recognize that there's something off about this. I think that again, critical thinking comes from the Holy Spirit, and so yeah.
Well, you know what? I think I want to let you go, Jarrett, because I don't want to kill your time, and we've been here for quite some time, an hour and 45 minutes almost. So
Ooh, that's a long time.
thank you so much for coming on the channel. I loved it. I appreciated it.
That
You
was
want to do
fine.
this? I'd love to do this again if you're up for it.
Absolutely, brother. Yes. Oh, please. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm here. You're here, and I'm gonna look better at the camera. I'm really bad. I might put like a face and have the camera like come through the the paper or something like that, so I can be like, hey, I'm talking to Brother Aaron right there. Because I've been looking at you talking to me.
No, like this is people don't care, man. They just want to hear about Jesus and when we're getting out of here. They don't care where you're looking.
Okay. I apologize, guys.
Give us the
Brother
info
Aaron
and
makes us look very easy. Brother Dale too. Both of them are just like flawless. Like, I thought these were anchormen. I come in here like, okay, I gotta.
no,
Okay.
no. This was wonderful. This was very nice. This is an uplift for myself, and I'm sure it was for everybody else here. So thank you, brother, for coming on. And once again,
Thank you for
guys,
having me on.
get tight with Christ. There's a sign
Yes.
behind me. How do I get out of the way here? Get into relationship
Woo!
with Jesus, and
Woo!
Jared would agree, of course. And this is
Yes,
why we're doing
absolutely.
this.
Time
We're
is
doing
short.
this because time is short. This is why we started these channels. We couldn't care less about these channels. We just want you to know about Jesus and
Yes.
to understand the
So
times that we're in. We've got to be close. And so
yeah.
with that, and yes, again, his channel's Supernatural by Design. It's written the way that he wrote it there. And he puts together some real fun videos with fun charts. So,
Thank you,
well,
brother. I
God bless you,
appreciate it.
Jarrett. And thank you so
God
much for
bless you
coming.
all. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for coming on, and we'll talk soon. One day closer. Go, Jesus, go.
One day closer.